Hello there, this is a video accompanying the Joomla tutorial series developing an MVC component, and it's the second video associated with this step, adding cache. And in this video what I'm proposing to do is talk through progressive cache and conservative cache. So if we go to our Joomla instance, this is Joomla version 3.9.2, and this is just really the home page. This is just like a default article which is being displayed. These the modules around the outside, and this little module is really just displaying the current time. So if I click on that, you'll see the time getting updated. So it's the current time somewhere in the world. I'm not sure exactly where. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on progressive caching and save that. And you can see that in our cache folder here there's nothing, so there's no cache on at the moment, and I've disabled the system page cache plugin, so it's not working. And as you see here, the current time is being updated. And excuse me, if I go to the database here, I'm just going to change this to U, as you can see there. Just save that. I'll refresh this. And you can see there, it's taking whatever is in the database. So it's not caching neither this view output nor these modules around here. And the main reason for that is that I'm logged on here. However, if you go to the cache, you can see that there are some cache folders here where different kind of components or different bits of code within the Joomla system have seen that cache is on and have kind of used that opportunity to cache some things. So for example, if you can com modules, you've got some file here which something is associated with the modules, but I don't know the details of that. But you can see, as I say, that switching cache on means that some things have actually used the cache. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to log off here. And this will cause this to be represented. And if we look at our cache, we now have com content. And what this is the view output of this here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the database and change this to E again. So now in the database you've got LOREM. I'm going to go back here and do a refresh, and you see it hasn't changed to the database. It's just stuck with what is in the cache file. However, if you look at the current time, you see that it is being updated, and for some reason I noticed this is to do with the debug. So if I switch debug off and save that, and I'll just refresh this. It's 2603. I'll refresh it again, reload. 2603. So now it is actually being cached now that I've switched debug off. So if you're finding some problems, it's worthwhile checking debug and making sure it's off. So let's look at the cache folder. Here we've got the com content and we've got another one here called in com modules, and excuse me, this is where we're actually caching the modules. So with progressive cache, what we're doing is we're caching this bit here under certain conditions. In particular, the user has to be logged out, and we're caching these modules here. So if I go into that file, just check this time is 2603. If I go to this file and here, make sure I've got the right file here, and let 2603 26. And what I'm just going to do is change that to 99 in the cache file. Now when I refresh this, it should come up with 99 here, and you can see that there. If we then go into the articles, and we edit that article which was being shown, and I'm just going to change the LOREM, and I'm going to put DBASE, just so that we know that is the database. So this is now what is saved in the database. And we're now going to do a reload of this. And you can see it's changed it to dbase. So when we went into phpMyAdmin and changed it like this, we're just changing the database by itself. It didn't change the cache, but when we went into our admin and we changed it and we saved it, it changed it. And basically what it did was it cleared the cache. So if we go back here, and you can see that now we've got a content there. If we just save that again, it will run the same routine, hopefully to change the cache, to clear the cache, and now you can see there's no content there. So really what we've found is that with progressive cache, this is being cached here, but when we go into the database to change an article, it's going to clear that cache, and it's clearing the cache just for this component. So if we go back here, sorry, to progressive cache, we need to make sure the cache plugin and debug is disabled, and it caches the component output, and this is stored in cache content for the content articles. When they change things through the admin, then it clears the cache for that effective component, and it caches the modules, and those are stored in that file in cache/com modules. So from the point of view of what's happening, that's what's visible on the screen. As I say, the summary is that this bit and the modules are cached when we put progressive cache on. Now if we want to understand what's happening behind the scenes, this is the little diagram that I showed in the last video, and we talked about initialization up here and then triggering the event on initialize. Now we haven't got the page cache plugin, so we continue on down here this time, and next Joomla is going to try to route the request. So it's going to find out how it handles that, and in particular the component that's going to be responsible. And if we just zoom in here, it will find the component which is responsible, and then it will require that component's, as it says here at the top, it requires that component mycomp.php, and this is the file that it will run, and it will capture the output buffer through obstart and obget contents. and save that for later later processing. But in the example of content, what it's going to run is it's going to go to our components, content, and it's going to run this content.php. Let's clear that. And this will be similar to our own hello world record. And down the bottom here, we've got this execute, and it gets the task, and the default task is display. So when it's display, as it is, you know, when you do a refresh of this, it is going to run the code in controller.php, and it's going to run the display method here. So if you look at content, there are a couple of things that it's doing in this display method. It's got this cacheable equals true variable, and that is set to true, and then there's some other conditions here which sets it to false. And this is really saying if the view that is being displayed is allowed to be cacheable or not. So in general it's true, but there are certain conditions under which it's not going to be cacheable, including this one, user equals get user, user get ID will respond with the user ID of the user, which will be greater than 0 if the user is logged on. So if the user is logged on, this is going to be true, and this variable here is going to be set to false, which is why we don't get it cached whenever the user is logged on. And the other thing it's setting up these safe URL parameters, and safe URL parameters are going to get passed into this call to the parent display. And the safe URL parameters really define what is going to be set as the cache ID or the cache key. Remember when we were looking at page cache, we said that it had to be a unique file for each page. Let me just run this again so that I can get the cache content. So here's the content file which holds the cache. Here it comes here. We can change this to cache and save that and refresh this. And we'll see cache. So it's picked that up from the cache file. But in terms of the file name, this bit here is going to be generated from certain IDs, or it's going to be an MD5 hash of certain information, and we'll have to make sure that this is unique for each case where you're going to have cache. So if you think about what can be cached in terms of content, this is just one article. There may be other articles which we're going to cache on the system, or there's going to be like featured articles or list of articles in a category. If it's got pagination, then there's going to be you know, different numbers of articles. So all of those things have to be taken into account whenever you actually generate a cache file. And the code here within our display is setting up the set of items which have to be taken into account, which really feed into that cache ID. So the code behind this is going to take the values of each of these items from the HTTP request, hash them together, and then generate that hash key, which is going to feed into the file name, this second half of the file name here. And then if we look at the parent is going to be in our base controller, and this is our base controller, or JController legacy. And here's our display method, and it's doing things like setting up the view and the model up here, but then it comes down to display the view, and it's checking a few things. It's checking if it's cacheable, it's checking factory get config get caching, which refers back to this down here, the system cache. And the system cache can be set to 0, caching disabled, 1, conservative caching, or 2, progressive caching. We've actually set it to 2. But if it's greater than or equal to 1, i.e. if caching is on at all, then it's going to go through here. And what it's going to do, it's going to set up these registered URL parameters from those URL parameters that are passed in, and those are what are going to be used to generate the key. It's then going to get a handle on the cache, and it's going to be a view type cache, and then it's going to try and get the cache, and it's this get is going to go to content. It's already got these URL parameters, so it can work out what this file name should be. It's going to see if there is a file name with that name, and then it's going to get the data from that file. Now, in the case that it doesn't get it from cache, then what it's going to do, it's going to run the file, and file it's going to run in inverted commas, it's really going to run view display. So it's going to basically do this and capture the output in that one of those obstart. So within the library code of get, if it doesn't find the data in a file, it's going to do an obstart and then run view display and capture the contents. And when it's captured the contents, it's going to write those contents to a cache file. So if it isn't there initially, this get is going to result in it being there once it's captured the contents from running view, the display method within this view instance here. Of course, we are already within we're sitting here, so this is going to be another obstart, so they're going to be nested, but that's okay. So what it's going to do is, it says here, try and get the cache. If there's no cache, it's going to run, or in this case, it's going to really run that method, call that method, display on the view, capture the output, and then cache that. So you can see that that's how it works for getting this aspect here from the cache file, and once you click on it to refresh the page, that's how the cache file gets set initially. So the second thing is associated with the modules, and if we run on through our code within Joomla, what it's doing after this, it's going to get the template, and the template is going to be found in templates directory. Templates, I'm running protostar, so it's going to be in protostar, and it's going to be index.php. So if we open that and have a look at it, this is what it's going to run as the template. There's a lot of stuff up here, which is PHP, and then we're coming down to the HTML, and within those HTML statements, we've got things like this: JDoc include modules at position 8. Here's another one: JDoc include modules at position 3. JDoc include message, which is kind of like the message bar. JDoc include component. So there's a bit of description online about how templates are executed. I'll put this URL into the notes on YouTube. But what it does is it does this in two phases. The first thing it does is it runs that index.php through the PHP parser. So when we look at all this stuff, all of this PHP code is going to be run by the PHP parser. All of this stuff, which is HTML, is just going to run straight through. And where we've got things like PHP here, we'll get the logo or whatever that gets echoed, for example, by that bit. So we're going to end up with HTML, these bits here, including these. So these are really, they kind of are outside the scope of PHP. There's no PHP tags out there, so PHP is just going to ignore them. So the output of sending it through the parser, whenever it's run it through the parser and got the contents, it's just going to have those JDoc include tags in it. So the second thing it does is it parses this, parses the output from here to identify those JDoc elements. So it runs through it and finds all of these JDoc elements. And then once it's found them all, it replaces those JDoc elements. So for example, it will find this line JDoc include type equals component, and it will stick into there, into that HTML, what it's got from out here. And the key thing from the progressive cache is the modules. So what it does, if it finds something like this, modules, it will look in that file that we looked at in our com modules cache. It will look in here for the appropriate module, get the data from there, and then put that data into that section within the HTML page. So I think that's all I was going to say about progressive cache. So what I'm going to do is go and change this and change it to conservative cache and save that. I'm going to log on. And I'm going to clear all the cache by pressing delete all. So when we look at our cache folder, it's now empty. So once again, if we run this, we get the time being updated. And I'm not going to do this, but you can try this by yourself. You can go in here, you can change this, and you'll find that it's not cached. And if we look here under cache, there's no com content, and the reason is that it's logged in. So we're going to log out now, and note under cache we've now got the com content. We've now got this file which has got all of the details there. We can do the same sort of thing. We can change this to cache and save that. Just close that, and then when we reload this page, it should come up with cache in there. Indeed it does. However, you notice that this is still being updated. Okay, and the reason for that is that if we go to modules, and this is the little module that I wrote for the current time, and a number of modules have got these advanced parameters, and the caching can be set to no caching or use global, and actually have it set to no caching. And that's why it's not being cached here. It's updated every time. However, I haven't changed this from when we were doing progressive cache. So that's an important thing about progressive cache, is that it overrides this here. So if we go back to the summary, the individual module cache setting is ignored. So when you've got progressive cache on, it just ignores this setting here. However, if you have conservative cache on, then it doesn't ignore it. So what I can do is I'll set this to use global, and then it refers to whatever the global is set to, which is going to be on. And I'll save that. Now if I refresh this, 4649, I'll do a reload again. 4649, and if we go into here we can see a folder mod cur time, which is my little module, and here it is here, and I can change this to 99 as usual. Save that and close that and refresh this, and you can see it's now 99. So you can see that's where it's cached. So if we go back to our diagram here and just look at conservative cache compared to progressive cache, this thing here is going to be the same. So remember in our code, when we looked at our base controller, it was looking at greater than and equal to 0 was the condition in our code. Up here, so it wasn't making any distinction between progressive caching and conservative caching, so both of those will result in the same thing. The difference really is down where it's replacing these JDoc elements, and in this case we don't have a common modules file. So if we look in com modules, we've got this file here, which is the little one, but we don't have the big one that we had before. That's the only file. So the difference with conservative caching is that it's not getting it from that main modules file. It's not putting all of the modules into the main file, so it's less aggressive caching, if you like. But what it's doing is it's going and running each of the modules in turn, and when it comes to an individual module, it's checking, can I cache that module? And it's using our caching parameter here. And if it's set to allow caching, then it's going to cache that, and it's going to cache it in a file in the module. So here I've got mod breadcrumbs or mod cur time. So that's the only functional difference I've found between conservative progressive caching. If you look here, you can see the tooltip, which says that you've got a bigger, faster, bigger system cache for progressive, and it includes the module renderers cache. So there's something in terms of size there, but I've only got file in my system. So it may be something to do with another sort of cache handler, which is pertinent there. So in summary, with caches, we need to ensure that the page cache plugin is disabled, and I would just check about the debug. If you have any problems, just check the debug as well. It caches the component output just the same as the progressive, puts it into cache content. The admin updates clear the cache for that affected component. Now I haven't gone through that, but you can try that yourself and convince yourself that that works. And it caches individual modules, not the set of modules as a, in bulk. And those individual modules are stored in the cache, mod breadcrumbs or whatever subfolder there. Okay, that's about it for now. Thanks very much for listening. Bye.